Hola, buenos días a todos. Hi everyone. Today we are going to be learning about saludos y despedidas in Español. So saludos meaning greetings and despedidas meaning farewells or goodbyes. So our goals for today, we want to be able to name two things that we can say when we meet somebody new, when we speak with somebody formal, or when it's time to leave. Okay, so las metas de hoy, poder nombrar dos cosas que podemos decir cuando conocemos a una persona nueva, hablamos con una persona formal o cuando es tiempo de salir. Okay, so let's get started. Empecemos. So think about some greetings that you might know in Spanish. So you might not know any right off the bat, and that's okay, or you might know a ton. But if you were to see somebody who you knew spoke Spanish, what is one thing that you might think to say to them? And if you can't think of anything, that's okay, but I'll give you a few seconds to brainstorm. So you might be thinking something like, hola, buenos días. We'll go over what these mean in just a second. ¿Cómo estás? Something like that. So if we are greeting someone in the morning or earlier in the day, we will say buenos días. So literally this translates to good days. Buenos meaning good and días meaning days. But in Spanish, they often use this for good morning. Buenas tardes means good afternoon. So one trick that you might use to remember this is think about in Spanish when we are late somewhere, we use the word tardy. And now think about afternoon. It's a little bit later in the day. So that might be a helpful way to remember that tardes means afternoons. Okay, so buenas tardes, good afternoon. So maybe around 3 p.m. Buenas noches literally means good nights, right? We would say good night. So in Spanish, it's a little bit different because in English, we just say good night when we are about to go to bed or when we're sort of saying goodbye to someone, we would say good night to them. But in Spanish, you can say buenas noches to greet someone. So in sort of how we would say, I hope you are having a good night. They would say good night, buenas noches. Okay? So, to meet new people, conocer a gente nueva. These are some things that we might say to someone when we first meet them. So just to break down this sentence, conocer means to know someone or to meet someone. They use the same word for that. Gente meaning people and nueva meaning new. Conocer a gente nueva, to meet new people. So one thing you might say is mucho gusto, nice to meet you. Something else you might say is encantado, or if you are a girl, you would say encantada. So this means we would say sort of delighted to meet you. It's delight, or I am delighted to meet you, right? And if you look at these words, it sort of looks like enchanted, right? And we don't really say I'm enchanted to meet you, but that might be a helpful way to remember it. Because saying that you're enchanted to meet someone or delighted to meet them sort of has a similar meaning. And we can also say, es un placer conocerte. So take a look at this word placer. It looks a little bit like the word pleasure in English, right? And we often say it is a pleasure to meet you. That's exactly what this means. So again, we have that word conocer, we have conocerte. So conocer, to meet. And then that te at the end just means to meet you. And then we can respond to any of these with igualmente, which just means likewise or right back at you too. So that's a good thing to remember. If anyone says any of these statements to you, that's one way you can respond. So what about when we want to ask others how they are? So, to say how are you, look at these three statements. I know they look awfully similar. We'll talk briefly about why they're slightly different. So, ¿cómo estás? All three of these mean how are you? ¿Cómo estás? ¿Cómo está? Y ¿cómo están? We use different forms of how are you depending on who we are talking to. So if we are talking to one person and we just want to say, how are you? And this person is someone casual, so maybe a friend or a sibling or someone our age, we would say, ¿Cómo estás? Or ¿Cómo estás tú? How are you? If we are speaking to somebody formal, so maybe a principal, an older adult, or a boss, we would say, ¿Cómo está? Or ¿Cómo está usted? ¿Cómo están? We would use if we are speaking to a group of people. So you all. ¿Cómo están ustedes? How are you all? And then finally, we can say ¿Qué tal?, which just means what's up. So we would probably, again, use this with someone informally or casually, like a friend. When do we use usted? So remember, usted is this middle one right here. ¿Cómo está usted? How are you? So we use this when we're speaking to someone where we need to be a little bit more formal or respectful or polite. So you might use this when speaking to a teacher, especially an older teacher, profesor, profesora, or when you're speaking to someone that you would in English call Mr. or Mrs. or Sir or Ma'am, Señor y Señora. So just keep that in mind. Some other things we can say when we are meeting new people, cuando conocemos a gente nueva. Where are you from? ¿De dónde eres? You could respond to this by saying, I am from Stockton. So I could say, soy de Stockton, or yo soy de Stockton. If you wanted to ask where somebody else is from, so now you're not talking to someone, but you're asking about them. So if I want to say, where is she from? So not where are you from? Now I'm talking about someone. Where is she from? ¿De dónde es ella? And you could respond by saying, she is from Stockton. Ella es de Stockton. So we are going to be talking more about these in the future, but I just want to introduce them to you. These are called subject pronouns, or pronombres sujetos en español. And these tell us who we are talking about. So we have I, yo, you. So this would be informally or casually. So if we're speaking to, again, a friend, a sibling, or somebody our age, let's jump down here because there's another version of you when we're speaking to somebody formal, again, like a boss or an older adult. We would use usted. So that's one major difference between Spanish and English. In English, it doesn't matter who we're talking to, we would still refer to them as you. But in Spanish, in Español, there's two ways to say you, tú and usted. It depends on if we're speaking to someone casually or informally, or if we're speaking to somebody formally. Again, don't try to memorize these right now. We're going to be talking about them for weeks. So, él would be he, ella, she, nosotros or nosotras would be we. So if we're saying we and it's a group of boys or boys and girls, we would say nosotros. But if it's a group of just girls, we would say nosotras. Let's jump down here to ustedes. We would use ustedes when we are speaking to a group of people. So if we're saying you all, ustedes. However, if we are in Spain, they use a different word for you all. They say vosotros. Or if it's a group of all girls, they would say vosotras. Okay? So just like how in England, sometimes they use different forms of a word than we use here in America, it's still English, right? But sometimes it changes depending on where we are. For the most part, we will be using ustedes. And finally, they, we would use either ellos or ellas. if we are speaking about a group of boys or about a group of boys and girls, we would say ellos. And if we're speaking about a group of just girls, we would say ellas. Again, please do not memorize this. We are going to be going over this later. We'll actually have an entire lesson just on these subject pronouns. But I want to introduce them to you just before we continue. Okay, so in English and in Spanish, igual en español, our sentences are made up of subjects and verbs, sujetos y verbos. So verbs are the actions, right? Los verbos son las acciones. So this could be an action that's really obvious, like walking or running or jumping, but sometimes verbs can be a little bit more subtle. They can be something like to be, right? So I am, you are, he is. Those are also verbs. But when we have a verb like to be or am, we need a subject so that we know who we are talking about. So in this sentence, yo soy una profesora de español. In English, this would mean I am a Spanish teacher. Soy would be our verb, or am. And then yo, or I, would be our subject, el sujeto. Okay? I can also say I am from Stockton. Soy de Stockton. And later on in another lesson, we'll be talking about why sometimes we can take out that subject. But just know that this means I am a Spanish teacher and I am from Stockton. So these are some other things you might hear someone ask about another person. ¿Cómo se llama ella? What's her name? And you can respond with, se llama Lindsay. Her name is Lindsay. Who is Lindsay? ¿Quién es Lindsay? Ella es una profesora de español. She is a Spanish teacher. ¿De dónde es? Where is she from? Ella es de Stockton. Okay, a different example. Again, same thing. We have our verb. So this is, él es mi mejor amigo Marco. So this is my best friend Marco. So our verb is going to be is, o en español, es. But we need to know who the subject is. So our subject is going to be él, he. And again, he is from the Dominican Republic. Es de la República Dominicana. And again, at a later date, we'll talk about why we can take out that subject. So again, what is his name? ¿Cómo se llama él? Se llama Marco. ¿Quién es Marco? Es mi mejor amigo. ¿De dónde es? Es de la República Dominicana. He is from the Dominican Republic. Okay, so it's hard to see a little bit, but if we look at the sentence in English, Elena es una buena, en español, Elena es una buena amiga. Who is the subject? Okay, Elena es una buena amiga. Who is the subject? So Elena is a good friend. So the subject is going to be Elena, right? Because the verb es or is, Elena is a good friend. Elena is the person who is being a good friend. Now this can get a little bit confusing sometimes because sometimes we just immediately look for the noun and say that that is the subject. So we might look at the word amiga, which means friend, and think, oh, well, friend is a noun. It's a person, a place, or a thing. So that must be the subject. However, again, the subject is the person who is doing the verb. So Elena is a good friend. Elena es una buena amiga. Elena is the one who is being a good friend. So we're almost done. Here are some things that we can say when it's time to leave or when we are getting ready to leave. So the first thing that we can say is tengo que irme. So this means I have to go. So tengo literally means I have, and then we would say to go. If we are going to be seeing somebody the next day, we could say hasta mañana. This literally means until tomorrow, but we would probably say see you tomorrow. Or nos vemos mañana technically means we will see each other tomorrow. Again, in English, we would probably say see you tomorrow. Or if we are going to be seeing someone later that day, we could say hasta luego, which literally means until later. Again, we would probably say see you later. Or hasta pronto, until soon, or as we would say, see you soon. So this is just a little slide I added for the end. But somos compañeros y compañeras de clases. This would mean we are classmates. So here I'm including the male classmates, compañeros, OS, y compañeras, the female classmates. If you just said somos compañeros de clase, that would include boys and girls. But sometimes it's nice and helpful to just include compañeros y compañeras just to emphasize that we are speaking about boys and girls. So, gracias, estudiantes. This is all that we have for today. If you weren't here the day that we did this lesson and are watching this video, make sure you check Google Classroom to look at any activities that went along with this lesson. And please let me know if you need any help. Nos vemos pronto. Que tengan un buen día.